Hello, I am Jake Collins, and this is Knightmare Series 3, Episode 5, which was first broadcast on the 6th of October, 1989. The entirety of this episode is taken up with Leo's quest, of course, and I've chosen it to commentate on here because it's the other episode, in addition to the two I've already commentated on, that I actually actively enjoy watching in Series 3 because of the events of the episode, not because of the team. The first kind of exposure I had to get reacquainted with Leo after having watched his quest once in 1989 was in the iShield fanzine when Series 3 superfan Tim Morris wrote a classic quest of Leo and bigged up the quest, the team, a lot and made it sound really good and really exciting. Made me really want to see it. And when I did finally rewatch on video Leo's quest in the summer of 1999, I thought, hang on, Tim Morris has put a very definite positive spin on this. They're not as faultless as he claims, this team. And nowadays, they do rather annoy me, or certainly the advisor closest to Treguard I find rather annoying. He exudes an air of being the leader, the best advisor, the brains of the team. He has a totalitarian air about him which is completely unjustified. And at times he does create some of that awkward viewing that I keep talking about. Leo has certain skills as a dungeoneer, but in some ways he'd make a better advisor because he's much too keen to give input about things he doesn't really understand. There in the corridor of the catacomb, for example, he starts sidestepping right without instruction, and the advisors are telling him go left because that's what the oracles just told them. And Leo's like, left! And has to completely change his whole way of thinking and stumble over to the left instead. As I said before, a good dungeoneer isn't a complete puppet. It makes contributions to the quest in certain ways, but dungeoneers like Leo and Julian, who want to have a lot of control over the quest, sometimes can make some awkward viewing and some difficult times for the advisors too. Like when Leo wants to sit in Merlin's chair here without realising there's a pit in the way. They've tried a very strange thing here of having Leo come into Merlin's room from the bottom of the screen. That's the only time that happens, and it doesn't look good, quite frankly. I like the setup here of the big door on the left and the small door on the right, and you have to bridge the pit between them with the steps to get to that all-important moment of meeting Merlin partway through level 2 and earning his magical aid for further progress. As I've said, that's a really good part of Knightmare for me, those significant level 2 moments with Merlin. You've done very well to get to this stage, but if you're going to really excel as a team on Knightmare, you must do even better, starting here with the test from Merlin. Significant times, and I do love it. And yeah, the door on the left and the door on the right really add to that sense of a journey. You're halfway through your journey, coming through that big door on the left, and you're coming out of the woods, as it were, hopefully well equipped, going through that smaller door on the right. It's a nice visual backup to the significance of the Merlin scene and its place in the quest as a whole. But you have Leo coming in from the bottom of the screen instead of through the door on the left, and walking up to the steps path and turning to the right. That just looks weird. I find it very distracting. I didn't like that when I first re-watched it in the summer of 1999. I don't like it now. But I do, of course, like this Merlin setup, as I've mentioned before. And we get to see precious little of it in this series, particularly around the middle of the series or the third quarter of the series, where teams keep messing up at this stage or before it. As I've mentioned before, that's why I do find bits of Series 3 rather repetitive, boring, Series 1-y, much more than I'm hoping for at that stage. But as I've also said, Series 3 is genuinely tough in that it punishes mistakes that the team make, which isn't the case in all series. And the fact that 6 out of 12 teams managed to get to the stage that Leo's got to here, of reaching that significant point with Merlin successfully summoning the steps, bridging the pit here, and getting to speak to Merlin, really underlines how much of an achievement that is to get this far, do that well in this series. And of course, only 5 of those 6 teams managed to progress past Merlin's room there, not in losing status. I'm thinking of Julie there, of course, not managing to earn Merlin's magic and dying late in level 2 because of it. So Leo's team have already proven themselves amongst the elite of this series by earning the sword spell from Merlin there, if not the elite of Knightmare as a whole. And I'd certainly include them on my list of impressive teams that make genuinely deserved progress into level 3. But despite what Tim Morris claims in Classic Quest, they're not perfect. It's a weird scenario having the giant amphibian in the first cave of the cavern range here, isn't it? This is something I did remember from when I was 6. The weird toad in the cave setup. And it really is just a piece of visual interest. Quite useful, I suppose. It stops you falling off the cliff at the end, like Simon did in the previous episode, under some very strange circumstances. But like Leo's team there, I'm very tempted to think, well, we've got to try and communicate with this thing. But no, it's just for show. It's just weird and interesting and unusual and keeps Knightmare viewers on their toes and gives them that unique Knightmare experience. The setup in the middle cave in the cavern range here gets awkward after this appearance. Leo wants to come off the wrong side of the table, you could see there, despite the fact that supposedly there's a wall right there. But he's persuaded to come down the right side, so it looks better in this shot, where you can see that the table's supposed to be touching the wall. But then later you get Ross and Martin standing between the table and the wall where there is no gap. And that does look rather awkward. Now here's a scene that Tim Morris was particularly struck by in that Classic Quest, and I was surprised to read about because I hadn't remembered that Hordorus was in Series 3 at all. But it's when Leo's team becomes the first team to encounter Hordorus the Confuser. Tim Morris is correct about that. We've already seen Hordorus as a ghost on a wall, as Nicholas Lamb described it in the early days of the Knightmare website. We've seen that in the previous episode. But this is Hordress's first speaking appearance in person. And it turns out to be somewhat of an anomalous, certainly a very unusual appearance for Hordress. He really is being an antagonist here. And Clifford Norgate does a remarkable job of making the scene very striking, very memorable, very threatening. It's genuinely one of my favourite scenes of Series 3, scenarios of Series 3. Unfortunately, the team start making it a bit awkward as we press on. But it's a very powerful first appearance of Hordress, as I say, a very threatening first appearance. Clifford Norgate always exudes that presence in a scene, and he does a wonderful job here, showing what an important part of Knightmare he's going to be throughout the rest of the show, what an important part of it Hordress is going to be throughout the rest of the show. But he's not going to be this antagonistic, almost evil, ever again. But how close were the team there to being killed by Hordress? Extremely close. Treguard couldn't believe it took the advisors so long to take action. He urges them, come on, action, action. Don't do anything for ages. Of course, Treguard has to prompt them here. You must dispel or the sword will turn on Leo. He has to puppy walk them through that, really. And I think perhaps Clifford Norgate thought he was delivering a death line to Leo there. If you cannot show respect, I will just have to show you some. Rise, please. What's he saying there? Is he trying to make Leo rise off the bridge? Or some creature rise from the depths to swipe Leo down and kill him? Tantalizing times there, but certainly Hordress was a millisecond away from bringing an end to Leo's quest there. Just in time, Tim Child has decided to let them off for finally coming out with spellcasting SWORD. How did Tim Morris describe that scene in Classic Quest? Casting the sword spell forces Hordress to beat a hasty retreat. That's definitely putting a spin on it, isn't it? And in fact, it's something of a lie. Hanging around, not taking any action, almost causes Hordress to kill them, and just in time the sword spell is cast, and Hordress takes a dignified withdrawal. Clifford is trying to get some nice interplay with Leo there, trying to engage him in conversation. What particular sort of creature are you? But Leo's not even joining in with that. It's a great scene, Hordress on the bridge with Leo, but it has the potential to be even better, and the fact that it isn't certainly is not Clifford Norgate's fault. Here we are with another very awkward scene with Motley and the minecarts. You can see at the beginning of this scene how Paul Valentine does have a tendency to be rather impatient with advisors giving descriptions to Dungeoneers. The Dungeoneer appears and Paul Valentine wants to get on with the scene nice and quickly, and sometimes he just completely talks over the advisor's descriptions, which is quite good for driving the speed of the show, giving it a good pace. But I do think as a Knightmare actor, Paul Valentine has many skills and is very entertaining, but he can get quite impatient at times with the process of Dungeoneers relaying things to him. And this is true when he's playing Sylvester Hands as well, and particularly Fidget, who's very shirty and impatient. I think Paul Valentine there channels a lot of his real feelings about interacting with Dungeoneers into Fidget's character. And Motley himself can get rather impatient and sarcastic at times, but he's always very entertaining as far as I'm concerned. And the awkward thing about this scene is the joke. that this team is giving to Motley in exchange for the push in the minecart. The advisor I was mentioning comes out with the joke in such a dry, matter-of-fact way that it's hard to imagine how anyone would ever laugh at it. And then Leo relays it to Motley. He tries to put a bit of life into it, give Leo his due there, but he tells it so badly. The minecart apparently doesn't actually move yet. Motley's just scraping his foot on the ground and not pushing it. That looks rather bad compared to McGrew and then Motley himself actually making it move on its other two appearances. And here's the minecart ride. As I always say, absolutely brilliant way of getting to level 3. Really striking, really special, really memorable, really underlines the achievement of making it all the way down to level 3. And visually, it's absolutely stunning. It's the perfect level 2 to level 3 transition, really. And anyone who has anything nice to say about Series 3, a lot of people have everything nice to say about Series 3. Some people, like me, have some nice things to say about Series 3, but always included in nice things about Series 3, you'll find that minecart ride. Definitely a contender, I would think, for the best visual spectacle ever in Knightmare. I think I would choose it, particularly thinking back on my memories of it at 6 years old and how much I was struck by it and did enjoy it at the time and did remember it for all those years. Going back to that joke, Motley's genuine reaction to it is wonderful, isn't it? Oof. There's no pretending to find it funny, indulging the team and laughing anyway, like with Jeremy in Series 4. Just, oof, not so much what I'd call a joke, but I've certainly heard nothing like it, so I suppose a bargain is a bargain. That's great work from Paul Valentine. Acting, improvising, playing Motley, but putting a lot of himself and his own reaction into the character. Classic, perfect Knightmare acting there. So what Paul Valentine lacks in patience, he certainly makes up for in his improvisational interactions with the Dungeoneers. This reminds me of the scene with Mark I was talking about on my previous commentary. Cavern White's sleeping. We have to be quiet because apparently they can hear now. There's a sprig of energy to pick up. There's also a bit of chalice for Leo. A nice, tense, level 3 scene, but not an actual challenge. And it strikes me again, I'd like to see the Cavern Whites used as an actual challenge after Series 1. But yeah, in practical terms, they're not. And this is their last appearance. We've got a couple of things here going back to Series 1, the final episode of Series 1 that we're going to see for the final time here in the 5th episode of Series 3. The Cavern Whites are the first of those. That joke that Leo did tell Motley eventually managed to get it out. Quite a popular style of joke that was around at the time. What's the difference between a crazy rabbit and counterfeit money? And then you do a little flip word play in the punchline. One is a mad bunny and the other is bad money. You can tell that advisor who comes up with it knows why it's funny, but obviously doesn't find any humour in it himself personally. And as I say, Leo attempts to put some life into it, delivering it to Motley, and the other is bad money, but he tells it so badly, and Motley starts saying the wrong thing, repeating it back, a professional rabbit, a crazy rabbit and counterfeit money. It's just really awkward. But Motley's reaction of, oof, makes the scene, I think. Kind of another last here from Merlin in level 3, and it's nice to see him as I was saying in my previous commentary, big but solid in level 3. I do appreciate that. We'll see him again in that way in level 3 with Martin, but on that occasion, he doesn't give out any spells as a reward for Martin's progress, which is a bit of a shame. A good aspect of level 3 gameplay here. Merlin appears, large, powerful, rewards the team for their excellent progress through the dungeon with 2 spells, Grip and Energy. And we're going to see Grip used in this episode. In fact, right now, in a rather satisfying way to freeze the face of the Medusa. We won't see Medusa again either. That goes back to early series 2. Some nice, tense, atmospheric level 3 moments here. We don't get to see level 3 that often on Knightmare. When we do, it's very special. And I do enjoy this passage of play very much, particularly as the really awkward bits of the episode are over now. They were late in level 2. They're trying to pick up that chalice symbol above the door is quite awkward, isn't it? And I can see why this team and Julie's team do find those little signposts rather confusing because, yeah, they do look somewhat like quest pieces. That's not a quest piece team, I think it's just a symbol, Treguard says to Julie's team. Although with Julie it's more forgivable than Leo, it kind of looks like a piece of the sword. That chalice symbol in the Medusa room there just looks like a whole silver chalice, not really like a quest piece. And of course they put it there after the confusion with Julian's team, Becca making Julian crash into the wall to try and get out of the Medusa room, instead of exiting through the door. Here's that other last appearance of something we first saw in the final episode of Series 1 and Level 3, the Gargoyle. Here with the Synchrovox technique to give it a mouth. We've seen quite a bit of this Gargoyle through Series 2, like the Cavern Whites, and here it is for the last time. And of course it's the fatal moment for this team. It's an obscure riddle or question, really, the Gargoyle asks here. It's a very specific piece of information, the largest ring on English ground, Avebury. I'm not surprised the team don't know that. They're from Kent, they're not from Wiltshire. There's no particular reason they should know that. Quite nice bit of atmosphere on the way out there. You'll learn nothing more from this creature, says Treguard. Hurry, or it may even turn hostile. Leo has to hurry out. There's a sense the Gargoyle maybe is going to turn hostile. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Slight change to the voice there. Nice atmospheric level 3 moments. But of course we might feel a bit flat now because this team has clearly missed some vital help from the Gargoyle and isn't therefore going to win. I do include this episode in Mogdred's 3 episodes in Series 3, although we don't get to see much of him, do we? We see his face pop into the corner of the level 3 clue room there right as temporal disruption occurs, and we've had a bit of his laughter. But yeah, I still count that as one of Mogdred's 3 episodes in Series 3 and 11 episodes in total. Have a look at the cast there. It's the only Series 3 cast that doesn't feature Natasha Pope. The way things worked out, Natasha Pope makes 7 appearances as Velda, 6 appearances as Brangwyn, and 2 appearances as Morgana, spread across all other episodes of this series, and episode 5 is the only one she doesn't appear in. Thanks for joining me for this commentary on Knightmare Series 3, Episode 5. Join me again next time, and you'll hear me talking about Knightmare Series 4, Episode 5.